Hey, welcome back to another episode of the She's Making an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Ngom. Today, we're talking with Lia Garvin. She is the best-selling author of Unstuck. She's a TEDx speaker and workplace strategist with experience leading team operations across Google, Microsoft, Apple, Bank of America. So we really talk about workplace dynamics, team building, onboarding, but also leadership and kind of getting over yourself so you can make a greater impact in the world. So I'm excited. Let's dive in. Hey, Lia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I am a workplace strategist and organizational consultant. And after spending about a decade in the corporate world, working in some of the most influential companies in tech, I decided to take this on the outside and really transform the workplace from the outside in. So now I work with teams and companies on how to build better managers, how to drive higher engagement, on the development and retention of women, and really how to work better together.
Awesome. So what led you into that space?
Yeah. So, my whole journey in the corporate world was working on team operations. It was rolling up my sleeves and figuring out, what's getting in people's way from delivering their work quickly, from, communication, from being able to communicate together, having clarity in roles and responsibilities. And I kept noticing that really simple shifts were needed, but it was really hard to gain momentum around those when I think a lot of times in the corporate world, there's a belief of let's focus on the work stuff first and the people stuff later. And sometimes I felt like I was pushing a rock uphill, but I really aim to disrupt the status quo of, why aren't things working for people and really make simple shifts. And I found really after the pandemic turned the workplace upside down and had, for so many of us to rethink what we want to be doing. I started my path to figuring out, well, how can I do this from the outside to work across more kinds of organizations and to really help people feel set up for success, both in larger businesses, if you're an entrepreneur running your own thing, if you're trying to go at it solo and you want to figure out what tools you need to be successful. So it's been really exciting to take this more macro lens to the work I'm doing.
Yeah. So what were some of the companies you were working with?
I worked at Microsoft for a while, then I worked at Apple, and I worked at Google. So a lot of the big tech.
Yeah.
I also worked at Bank of America many years ago. So had a wide range of experience across finance and tech mostly.
Yeah. So a lot of our audience, they're small business owners, right? So they have a small team in place. And I think the struggle that I see come up over and over again is just delegating and leading those team members well. So it's like they think only they can do it, right? And only they can do it right. Or if they delegate it, it won't get done, or balls are being dropped and people aren't like following through on their tasks. So can you speak into that of like when you're starting to lead a team, how can we lead that team effectively?
Absolutely. So I love this question because delegating can be one of the things I think most of us struggle with, even if we're asking a friend for help, right? I mean, right now as a solopreneur, I've thought about hiring a VA or getting help. And I'm like, I don't even know where to start. It's harder to even make that list. So as you say, I think when we have a smaller team and we're used to doing a lot of the work, that in and of itself can be hard to not only let go of control, but figure out what are the right types of things to do. And I think if you've hired a small team and you want to really leverage people to really take some of that load off you, it's important to do a couple of things. I mean, first, thinking about what are the high impact tasks that somebody else actually wants to take on. Because if someone is working with you because they want to grow their career and explore the space that you're in and have a lot of longevity there, they're likely not going to want to do just like all the stuff that you didn't want to do. Right. I mean, there's different kinds of roles for different kinds of things, but I think it can be really, it's really empowering for someone to take on things that allow them to develop into the role that you're in, right? So that you're really cultivating a strong bench, so to speak, for your own self. The next thing I think that's important to do is think about, what what are those tasks that have to be in a certain way, like the way that you do them
Mhm.
because it has to be, or what's just your preference, or what could be done a
Yeah.
totally different way. And figuring out as a leader, how can I let go a little bit to the how, because letting someone else bring their own ideas into the mix and show alternative ways to getting something done.
Mm.
Because it can be really, if we delegate something to someone and we're checking in constantly and sort of course correcting,
Yeah.
that person's going to say, well, okay, why don't you just do it?
Right.
Like, I don't think that you really trust me. So
Mm.
delegation with a small or large team, whatever it is, requires trust and letting go, which can be
Mm.
scary. Recognize that, but the more we set expectations around, like I said, what has to be done a certain way, what really success looks like, then we can take a step back and allow people to, bring their own ideas to the situation.
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the things I see a lot is just like the fear of letting go of some of those
Yeah.
tasks. It's like only I can do it.
Yeah.
Or they start to delegate to somebody and maybe they're not clear on what needs to actually be done or the expectations around it. So then balls are being dropped.
Yeah.
And then either like they're not sure what the disconnect is. So then they're blaming the other person or they're not taking responsibility. But they weren't clear in the beginning of what like actually they wanted done. So can you speak into like when you actually are bringing somebody on, like how do you onboard them and set them up for success?
Yeah. I think starting with, what is your vision for the company, sharing how you like to work, how you like to communicate. Because like you said, a lot of it comes down to clarity and expectations. So if I'm someone that really needs to be informed, that's okay. The other person just needs to know that. So I think a lot of the onboarding is about getting to know each other's work styles, talking about, hey, here are some of the things when I feel overwhelmed that sort of come up for me. Asking the other, your employee the same kinds of things. How do we want to have hard conversations? How do we want to talk about feedback? Getting these things out in the open in an onboarding situation allows you to have the conversations when the tensions are low, before anything is kind of in a heightened state, before there's any stress, when everyone's really excited and everyone's really open to share, then you have something you can point back to. So I think this is one of the most critical things, especially for entrepreneurs that are hiring friends or people they knew already. I think this can come up a lot, and we can say, well, I brought my friend on, I trust them for different things, but I'm not liking how they're working on this thing. And I don't know how to tell them.
Yeah.
Well, we have to have that conversation up front.
Yeah. That would make me a little nervous, like hire friends or family into the business. I'm like, we have a good dynamic over here. I don't know how this is going to play out.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is like expecting people to read our minds too.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, funny story. So we have a almost 3-year-old. She's 2. And she's so attached to daddy. And so I was like putting her to bed and like she wasn't asleep yet. And my husband comes home and he thought she was going to be asleep. And because she wasn't, it's like this whole thing of like, now I need daddy. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. He thought I was going to put her down for bed, but he didn't verbalize that to me of like, I want her in bed by this time or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not a mind reader. Like you got to tell me what, like if you wanted her in bed by this time before like the chaos starts, you could have snuck it.
Exactly. Oh, I get it. I have an almost 4-year-old. So it's like, it continues.
It continues. Yeah. My son's 9 now. So I'm like, this phase will eventually pass and then I'll be replaced with something else.
Exactly.
Children.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole, like, I'm not a mind reader thing goes into business of like, we expect them to read our minds and do it exactly how we envision it without like actually articulating that.
Yeah. And like you say, you kind of, because it's in your head, you think you explained it probably better than you did or in a more comprehensive way. And I think, part of I think what we can do as leaders is recognize our own triggers. Like I mentioned, talking about that first, we got to know what they are. And we have to see, okay, I know that I start wanting to be in the details when I get stressed. I know that I start wanting to be busier when I have uncertainty. I think that's a trap a lot of us fall into is, I don't know what the future holds. So I'll just do more work and work constantly. And so this is another thing to talk about in onboarding is expectations around work hours, texting, emailing, chat, whatever, because in a smaller team, I think it can be easier to feel like you have people, at your disposal. Maybe it's really informal. You started with text, but Now it's the weekend. You got an idea. It's 9:30 at night. The other person doesn't want to hear from you. And so you really want to figure that out up front.
Yeah. What are some like boundaries or things that you have, like, you think you should get set up in place right away?
So I'd say first and foremost, talking about work schedule. Well, how do we want to communicate outside of that? I think some leaders say, I want to send an email when I think of something, and I will put, don't need to look at this till Monday. I strongly advise against that, because you sent it, maybe someone gets thinking about it. You sort of sent the message that it doesn't have to be till Monday, but I kind of would like it to be now. So I think using tools like Schedule Send, it allows you to get everything off of your to-do list without asking somebody else to start thinking about it. Talking about when do you want to use email versus Slack, or instant message versus text versus calling. What kind of meetings you want to use, video conference versus not. If you have an office, when you want to come into the office versus not, what kinds of events. These things, again, it's talking about these up front can feel like, are we making all these rules? No, it's about working norms to ensure everybody can be successful.
Yeah. Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit mindset stuff, because I know you like leaning into that. So can you give examples of, when you've experienced setback or rejection, and just how you reframe it?
Yeah. So, you mentioned the concept reframing, and this is really the central theme of the work that I do, is how to recognize when we're feeling stuck, when we feel like we keep trying something over and over, and we're not quite breaking through, or we're not getting the result we want, and how to look at the situation through another perspective. And actually, my book Unstuck is based on where these sort of sticky situations come up across a ton of different dimensions in the workplace, from feedback to comparison to decision-making, negotiating. And, by looking at it in a perspective, I would say mainly that it's not all about me. It's not about my self-worth, but it's about some external thing here. That's where we can start to reframe. So I think for, business owners, for entrepreneurs, one thing that can come up a lot is, and I know you talk about this a lot on your show, is, pricing and growth and building, visibility. And I think a big limiting belief we can have there, I certainly did, was around, talking about yourself or talking about your value and just discomfort around money and asking people, to share what you're doing. And a lot of that comes down to us feeling like it's some sort of reflection of ourself and our self-worth. But the reality is when we're building something, it's about that thing. And so we want to start externalizing it and getting some distance. When you're, sharing the price for a service that you're providing, it's about the impact and the transformation you're making for someone, or what the service, gives, or what the product, entails. It's not about you and like, are you worth this amount of money for your time? And so I think that's one of the big reasons in the entrepreneurial space, it's a big push to not trade time for money, to talk about, sort of to get out of the hourly mindset, because I think that can keep us stuck on, I am worth this amount of time based on an old construct from when we had a different kind of job.
Right.
So I think that's one of the big limiting beliefs that can sort of make us feel stuck around value, around our impact, around negotiating, around is thinking everything that's happening is connected to our self-worth.
Yeah. What do you think are some things like steps that we can take, like tangible action steps we can take to really work through those limiting beliefs?
Yeah. So with something around negotiating, something I always encourage folks to do is to talk about, especially if, data shows that, especially for women, it's easier to negotiate on behalf of something else instead of ourselves, right? There's a lot of data that shows that. So to remember, you are negotiating on behalf of something else. It's your business, it's your product, it's your service. So taking that mindset and remembering before you have that conversation, hey, this is not my self-worth, about my self-worth. I'm advocating around the value of this thing. And can we have an objective conversation around, hey, this is the value of this. This is what's included here. And hey, do we see eye to eye on that? That starts to depersonalize it. So that's the first thing around negotiation, is to depersonalize, to remember you're talking about something objectively, and you can negotiate the price from there. I think with, you know, we can have a limiting belief around visibility, around feeling like we're bragging or showing off or who really cares. And, again, thinking about the why of why are you doing what you're doing? What impact does it have? What transformation are you promising? What do you hope to see for your clients or, the users of your product? What's the vision? And the more we can tune into that, we can see we're a vehicle for delivering that transformation. But again, it's not about us. So I think for folks that are feeling stuck around that, I did a lot. I share in my book, when I was saying I was writing a book, I would get like laugh uncomfortably. I couldn't even talk about it. I felt like people were like, oh, why are you writing a book? It was so, but finally I started to see, well, the book was to help other people not feel stuck in the ways I felt stuck. Why wouldn't I want to talk about that and share that with other people? So reconnecting with the motivator, with the why, with the value you bring to others, that can help quiet those limiting beliefs so much and help us reframe that perspective.
Yeah. So as you're writing the book, did you ever have the thought of like, who am I to write this book?
Oh my God, like every day.
Yeah.
Before, while I was writing it, after. And I struggled with a while about talking about it, with telling people about it, with wanting to, share with other people, because I felt like maybe people are going to say, one, who cares, or that I think I'm so great, or I know everything. And, I took it was vulnerable. The way in which I wrote it was very conversational. It was really sort of my internal monologue. So that was a risk as well, of putting like, this is my story. Like, here it is. So I struggled with this a lot. And what helped me was, leaning into the discomfort and sharing with people and seeing, hey, people were really finding a lot of value in this, and seeing, they liked the relatability of it. They liked having someone share their experience from the thick of it, right? Not like 10 years later, what it was like, in the corporate world, but I'm in this, I'm figuring out as I go, and here's how I'm evolving. So, it took just going for it and saying, okay, I want to put this out in the world. I'm not going to let the fear stop me. I'm not going to let the discomfort stop me. And I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Any advice for someone that wants to write a book?
Yes. I would think about this a lot, of maybe doing a kind of behind the scenes video on it. I would say, especially I've only written a nonfiction book. So I think if you're writing any kind of nonfiction or business book, breaking it up into sections that you can work on at different periods of time. So especially if you're not spending your full-time hours writing a book and you're trying to fit it in between parenting and working and this and that, you may have like pockets of 30, 45 minutes to write. And what I found really useful was, my book has 12 chapters. I had 12 topics that when I had an idea, I could write a little bit about one or another. So I think, going into the process with somewhat of an outline and being able to chunk it up into places that you can add whenever you have a little bit pockets of time.
Yeah. Awesome. What's one of the best books you've read?
Ooh, I love books about team culture and team dynamics. And since that's my sort of, I nerd out with that kind of thing. So one of my favorite books in that space is called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And I love that book because it talks about really specific and concrete things teams have done and can do across any kind of industry. So it talks about, restaurant industry, military, tech, sports, and using things that are called belonging cues, like little signals to people that they're seen, that they matter, that they're a part of something special, and how that drives motivation in teams. And I think for small business owners and entrepreneurs, this is something we have total control to create, like the greatest company culture that we imagine. And a lot of times, especially in work I do with startups, they're often past the stage, like they've just started growing, where they wish like, hey, if I thought about this a little bit earlier of how I want to build my team, how I want people to be communicating, how I want people to working together, like you asked about onboarding or some of these working norms. The ability to grow faster would be there. The ability to make sure we have the right folks innovating, that we have a diverse and inclusive team will be there. So I think I like to study some of these books about large organizations to apply to smaller, because
Yeah.
it's like the secret sauce to how we could build it from the ground up.
Yeah. What are some of those things for belonging?
Yeah. So one example is like having, you know, team swag, like logos, t-shirts, kind of things like that. And not to create like waste. I know there's like a lot of like corporate garbage stuff,
Yeah.
but having a cohesive identity can send the signal, we're a part of something. So maybe, and that can even be like having a group chat that you send funny memes. I think little traditions is another. So maybe in your company, every Friday, people post a funny picture from their childhood. Or I worked on a design team where people would Photoshop people into different places. And on Fridays, they would do a
That's
whole, like,
funny.
everyone would send them. So I think setting up some little traditions to create the team identity. It doesn't have to be physical, like I said, it doesn't have to be hoodies and t-shirts, but it can be, what are our little things that make us who we are? And that's another piece that starts to create this culture of fun, of levity, of we're all in this together.
Yeah. What does it mean to you to make an impact?
I think making an impact for me is helping, we spend so much time working, whether we're in a company or on our own, making that easier for people. That is my goal. Whether you are on your own, doing something in a, working for a small company in the corporate world, making work easier to get done. And it doesn't mean, I think it's like ease, not easy, I think is the point. And I think it's from working in such difficult environments that are hard to get hired in. The pressure is very high. The drive to, to achieve is really high. And seeing how it just people can feel like, like they don't have recognition, like their work doesn't matter, like it's never enough. And this is something very present in the corporate world, but I think it's present in any kind of environment. And we're seeing is a big driver for people leaving the jobs that they're in, whether it's in a big company or small, is feeling like, do I even matter here? And I think for me, making an impact is helping show people that they matter no matter what situation they're in, and helping give leaders tools to connect the dots for people. So I love working with managers. I do a lot of workshops through my consulting work with managers on how to show people, move people from the what to the so what when they think about their work, how to connect the dots between what you did and why it matters and how it really fits into the bigger vision of the company. Because if we don't see that, it's kind of like, what's the point? We don't have a connection to the work necessarily. It may feel like it's temporary, and it's really hard to be resilient when there's uncertainty and change.
Yeah, definitely. Well, tell us about the book and where we can connect with you.
Yeah. So the book Unstuck, Reframe Your Thinking to Free Yourself from the Patterns and People That Hold You Back. Again, this dives into 12 common challenges that show up for women, but really anybody in the workplace, and how to use this power of reframing to overcome them. So, we talked about negotiation and impact. Another, is feedback. I think that comes up a lot, whether it's you dealing with your own kind of stuff or in a company, of how do you look at feedback as information, not a judgment of you and your worth again. So a lot of the topics I dive into include examining, the inner critic, imposter feelings, where the ego plays a role across it. And I offer a ton of really concrete and actionable tools and strategies for overcoming them. Each chapter has an exercise to run through at the end to really drive it home. And so the book's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you find books. And you can also grab it on my website at liagarvin.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link it below. Lia, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you too. Yeah.